Imagine this. In a regular school, a teacher's serious injury sparks a scandal that shocks the entire staff. The principal refuses to call an ambulance, fearing a bad reputation for the school, and keeps the injured woman locked away, despite the obvious danger to her life. What happens next? A conspiracy of silence, union intervention, or well-deserved punishment for the administration. This is Real Talk Tales, the channel where I share real people's stories. My supervisor refused to call an ambulance for an injured colleague, and it ended badly for her. I'm interested to know your opinion about a situation that happened at the elementary school where I teach. It's been a few months since it happened, but everyone still remembers it. On the morning of the first day of school, at the entrance, one of my colleagues tripped and fell down the concrete steps. It was horrible. She split open the back of her head. While the school nurse was evaluating the situation, our principal ran up, ordered us to help the injured teacher get to her feet and go into the building, and then told everyone who had witnessed the incident that they were forbidden to call an ambulance because she did not want to create a scene or alarm the children or worry the parents. The injured teacher was kept in the principal's office with a stack of paper towels pressed to her head for nearly half an hour, until most of the kids had gone to their classrooms. Only then was the school nurse finally allowed to make a phone call for someone to take the teacher to the hospital, but it had to be a family member, not an ambulance. After several phone calls, the nurse reached the teacher's daughter-in-law, who came to pick her up and take her to the hospital. In total, more than an hour passed between the injury and getting to the hospital. What's ironic is that the school is on the same street as the hospital, so an ambulance could have gotten there in less than 20 minutes. The principal literally made my colleague wait for help that long because of her fear of public judgment. It turned out my colleague had a concussion, no surprise, and needed 8 stitches in her head. As far as I know, she didn't lose consciousness, but she said she was so stunned that instead of advocating for herself and requesting emergency help, she just went along with whatever the principal decided. Honestly, I don't think she could have even spoken in her state. After this incident, she missed a week and a half of work and had lingering headaches for a month or so. We were all shocked that our principal decided to keep her in the office with a head injury until it was convenient to send her to the hospital. Logically, a person's life comes first, and a head injury needs immediate care no matter what scene it may create. But truth be told, the principal can be very intimidating at times, and her decisions even outweigh the nurses. We're all extremely worried by the fact that she placed the school's reputation above the safety of an injured person. I probably know what she was thinking. Those parents will never leave me alone if they see an ambulance. They'll think the school is dangerous for their kids. I understand not wanting parents to swarm you, but this teacher could have had a much worse head or spinal injury than what she actually had. It shouldn't be up to the principal to decide whether her staff needs urgent medical care. We were all shocked after this incident and worried that if anyone else ever gets hurt, the same would be done to us. There were even jokes like, "Hey, be careful carrying that box of books. If you drop it on your foot, you won't be allowed to use crutches because the parents won't like that." Some people say it was just a one-time mistake, maybe from nerves on the first day of school, but I worry this says more about her priorities than anything else. What do you think about this? Was anything legally wrong with her actions? Comments to the post. Author, you need to immediately involve your union so they can bring this matter to the superintendent and the appropriate high-ranking officials. A superintendent is the head of schools in the district, or an official supervisor or inspector in the UK/US. In this case, it's someone in a high administrative position. This principal lacks basic judgment about how to respond in an emergency, which is very dangerous. At our school, we have a policy that says we must notify our administrators first in an emergency. As you can see, that's exactly why this situation happened. I feel sorry for your colleague. After reading this, I just can't control my anger. Go to your union. You will be understood, and the right decision about your principal's incompetence will be made. If a principal doesn't want to cause a scene over a teacher, what will happen if a student gets hurt? I'm also concerned about the nurse's actions. If an ambulance was medically necessary, the nurse should have used professional judgment and called one. Yes, obviously the principal created a terrible situation, but did it occur to any of the teachers or school staff to call an ambulance anyway? So your colleague wouldn't bleed from the head for an hour? You all have mobile phones, a 30-second call to 911, and there'd be no way to trace who called. The principal is definitely to blame, but you and your colleagues didn't behave ethically either, letting your fellow teacher bleed from her head for an hour. Author, I understand where you're coming from, but very few of us, including me, even knew about the incident until the teacher was already at the hospital. I couldn't call anyone because I didn't know about it until later. I suspect that if the teacher had died, the principal would have sent someone to the funeral to ask if she'd left any lesson plans for the next quarter. You may laugh, but the same principal once basically forced a teacher who went into early labor at school to keep attending a special meeting over the phone on the way to the hospital. So yes, your example was probably meant as hyperbole, but it's actually not that far from reality. Update. It's been just over 2 years since I wrote to you about my school principal, who kept a teacher with a head injury in her office instead of calling 911. A lot has happened since then, to the teacher, the principal, and me, so I wanted to give you an update. Sorry that it's a bit long. First, the injured teacher, as far as I know, she never got the union involved, even though everyone around her recommended it. At the end of the school year, she was transferred to another school in the same district. At my school, the principal would often push for staff transfers to punish people, but usually the person transferred actually felt relieved. It was intended as punishment, but it turned out to be a reward. The teacher is much happier at the new school than she was before. Some in the comments said someone should have gone over the principal's head and called 911 when the teacher fell, but most of us didn't even know about the incident until almost the evening of that same day. We were all busy with other first day of school activities, so the principal managed to hide the incident from most of us. One of the few who understood the situation right away was the school nurse, whom the principal forced to keep quiet at that moment. I don't excuse the decision not to call 911, but I assure you this principal could make your life miserable if you didn't do what she asked, and few people ever stood up to her. It was a very stifling work environment, and I myself often thought about transferring elsewhere. Not long after the first part of the story was posted, I had a falling out with the principal, and I'm very grateful for all the great advice I got on how to resolve issues. I was still at a pretty early stage in my career, and although I knew about the importance of the union, I felt that bringing it in would mean I couldn't handle my own problems. But I hit a dead end, and I saw how crucial it was to have state support. I was a certified teacher in my state, but at that time, my position didn't require a teaching certificate. I was a classroom assistant, hoping to become a full-time teacher at some point, starting out as an aide, which is common in my state. Full-time teaching positions require 30 days notice when quitting because it takes time to hire a replacement. Teachers leaving with less than 30 days notice can literally have a permanent negative mark placed on their state teaching certificate, which follows them anywhere in the state and can keep them from getting a job at a good school, so it's a big deal. Despite being a certified teacher, the aide position I held at the time only required the standard 2 weeks notice. When I gave my official resignation letter to the principal, she mistakenly replied that even though my position didn't require 30 days notice, since I was a certified teacher, she was going to hold me to the 30-day notice policy. She told me she wouldn't release me from the job for 30 days from my resignation date. In effect, she was holding me to a higher standard than my position required. At the end of the meeting, she threatened to report me to the state if I didn't follow her made-up policy. I put on a polite smile and immediately left her office to call my union rep, who shared my anger about the situation. Within a few days, a union lawyer contacted the principal and told her she couldn't force me to work 30 days beyond my official resignation. The principal insisted that it was her right to demand any notice period she wanted. So my union lawyer took it a step further and reached out to the district superintendent, who called her and essentially said, "I'm calling to let you know that one of your principals is trying to block an employee's timely resignation, and the union will escalate the issue if the administration doesn't resolve it properly." The superintendent was not happy about this. He personally called me to confirm that my last day would be as stated in my resignation letter, not the date the principal wanted, and wished me all the best. I heard from others that he really gave the principal a hard time after that, and she basically ignored me for the rest of my notice period, which suited me fine. Since then, I haven't heard her say another word about my resignation date, which makes me truly happy. I'm glad I didn't let her force me to stay longer than necessary, as my husband and I were moving into a new house and wanted to start fresh. My only concern was whether I'd ever need to contact the principal again, because she's definitely the type to hold a grudge. But that resolved itself a few months later, as she retired at the end of the school year. Friends told me that the superintendent was never really her biggest fan, and gently asked her to retire. My former colleagues now say it is much nicer to work at the school under the new principal, so I can confidently say that if I ever want to go back, I'll be joining a great team, and some of the teachers I worked closely with before will give me excellent references. I'm really glad I wrote my post, because the advice I received about the situation with my injured colleague proved invaluable in my own life. This story clearly demonstrates how important it is not to ignore emergency situations and always put people's lives and health first, regardless of fear or pressure from management. It reminds us that our responsibility towards colleagues begins with personal initiative and the courage to do the right thing, even if it means disagreeing with superiors. Unfortunately, indifference or the fear of losing face can seriously harm someone. The main lesson here is to always protect yourself and your colleagues. Don't stay silent about injustice, and don't be afraid to reach out to unions for help. After all, a human life is far more important than an institution's reputation or someone's job title. Thank you for watching this incredible story with us. If it was interesting or valuable to you, like and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories.